pleasure to bring up Nicholas Lawrence. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
Yeah. Hey, we got some cows coming out to you. So, all righty. Well, hey, we're back in the same old place here, Sweet Home Chicago. So it is so good to be surrounded by fellow leaders and professionals in our industry, and I just love getting to hear what's working for folks and sharing in our common struggles. This is like our group therapy, isn't it? So it's good to get together, and this is a lot more fun than my HR conferences. So I'm glad I get to break out of that a little bit. So I want to start off with, and by the way, in true conference fashion, I'm losing my voice, so I've got about every drink I could find up here. So if you'll just bear with me, and we'll get through it together. A few of you in the audience know me, so if I say something way off base, if you just call me out, but if it's a little embellishment, just let it go. That would be helpful for me. So hey, I want to get started with the poll, so be honest with me. How many of you have heard the following phrase in your restaurants from your team or your customers, or maybe you've observed it? It's this: we're short-staffed. We don't have enough people. Be honest. Has anyone heard that? Like 110%. So someone had two hands up over here. So yeah, how many of you would say that's your number one issue? Maybe number two, right? Finding enough people. A lot of us, right? So okay, so this slide deck is going to work. I had a couple other ones, but we'll stick with this one. So what are we going to do about it, right? So let's talk about it. You know, when I used to hear that phrase from my leaders, we're short-staffed, we don't have enough people, it really bothered me. It really frustrated me. I thought they were saying, you know, Nick and his team, they're not really doing their job. And I took it personal. And so I gather my HR team around and I'd say, we are going to hire a bunch of people, a ton of people, really good people. And we won't know we're done until someone comes up to me and says, I think I'm going to quit because I'm not getting enough hours. Like that's how extreme I took it. And we'd have seasons where we were good and then we weren't good. And I almost mentally gave up. I thought, maybe this is just part of our industry. It's just the way it's going to be. And it's just a challenge we're going to have to face. And eventually I thought, I wonder if being short-staffed or feeling short-staffed, because that's fair too, is that a downstream symptom of maybe something else is going on up the river, right? It had to be. And eventually I stumbled upon this question, and I started asking our leaders and our clients, are we short-staffed because we don't have enough people? Or are our team members not performing at full capacity, and or our leaders aren't making real-time strategic decisions? And over and over and over again, what I heard from our team, our leaders, and my clients was, you know, it's about 20%. We just don't have enough people. It's about 20%. We just don't have enough people. So I sat down, I really did the math on that, and I crunched the numbers, and you can double check me. So that means 80% is the second one. 80, right? 80% is going on here. I thought, okay, well, so less than 20% of your staffing issues are due to headcount alone. So you can fix 80% of your staffing issues by another method, and we're going to talk about that today. So a little bit about my background. I spent 11 years with Macy's and Target, and got a business degree from IU, and big Buckeye fan. So OH, anyone out there? No? Okay, that's okay. There's a couple, right? So, and now I'm at Chick-fil-A, so I have really embraced red in a big way. Hold on. There we go. That's better, right? So, you know, and when I was with those companies, I learned a lot. They were really good companies, but every time we got around the leadership table, and one of my bosses inevitably said something like this: we need to grow sales over last year, right? And we got to find great people. Everyone basically is saying that, or you should be, your version of that. I would always say, you know what? Why don't we just hire those people like Chick-fil-A? Those are good people. I ate at the mall food court a couple of times a week, and I just loved the experience I got and how friendly they were and how folksy they were. And I'm kind of a slow learner, I got to be honest. After 11 years, one day I had this thought: what if I just went and worked for Chick-fil-A? So I did, and it's been an incredible blessing. These are supposed to come up one at a time. That's okay. So I did, and when people find out I work for Chick-fil-A, these are the questions I get. Here's the first one: hey, are you going to put a restaurant, insert wherever they live or wherever they desire to have a restaurant? And I am sworn to secrecy on that, so can't help you there. But the other questions I get, the ones that made me want to join the company, and the ones that get me out of bed every morning, are these: where do you find your people, and how do you train your staff? And it's an incredible blessing and honor that our customers would ask us this. And a lot of times they ask me in the dining room, "Hey, where do you get these people? How do you train them?" And I won't name names given, we're here with industry folks, but I just look around and I say, well, she's from X and he's from Y and he's from Z. A lot of them came from our competitors, and not because we're like actively recruiting or poaching. It's just they were already out there in the marketplace, right? And I really hope that we're able to steward them and shepherd them in a way that makes them want to stay with us. So, all this is supposed to. Okay, I won't let it derail me. So, anyways, not sure why it's not coming in bullet point by bullet point, but let's talk about the candidate experience, right? So, last year, franchise group I support that has 2 freestanding restaurants and then kind of what we call a captive venue. It's in a sports stadium, so we'll call it 2.5, right? They had over 2,500 applicants apply in 2023. They hired 210, so about 9%. But look at this. It took the industry average is 4.1 days to contact the candidate. And I challenge you to figure out what is your time, right? And if you don't know, figure it out. But 4.1 days to contact the candidate. We said this was probably our number 1, maybe number 2 issue. And we're having folks apply, and it's taken us 4 days to get to them, right? My team and I were able to get that down to just almost a day, right? 24 hours. And then the time from application to hire we're pushing 3 weeks, right, in the industry, 17.5 days. That is staggering. My team and I were able to get that down to 7 days. So that makes a big, big difference. And you might be thinking, well, how do you do it, right? You have to put resources into it. Whenever someone calls me and says, hey, how are you doing what you're doing? I say, well, how many hours a week is your store dedicating to HR? And, 5, 6, 7. I'm like, that's not enough. You can barely open your laptop in 5 hours, right? So you have to dedicate someone to it, and it's probably not the GM, right? They're too busy. So that's the candidate experience. Here's the state of the workforce, right? And we've kind of heard some of this already. Let me come over here. I'm sorry. So our turnover is 150%. We kind of already know that, right? The retention, look at this. Only 54% of new hires make it to day 90. That's scary. 54% make it to day 90. Some of them don't make it to 90 minutes, right? We've all had that. Let's be honest. And look what it costs us, almost $6,000. You see, sometimes when our leaders are quick to want to get rid of someone, I say, hey, what can we raise them up before we coach them out? Because it's probably going to take me 3 months to find their replacement. It's going to take me another 3 months to train them. So we're about to make a 6 months decision, and it could cost us $6,000. So if we had to, could we coach this person to success? And the answer is almost always yes, right? So, and then we've all probably elevated our compensation. We've elevated benefits. We're competing against remote work, right? Our customers aren't in my living room at home, thank goodness. And we're competing from work from home, work from smartphone, right? This influencer, YouTube lifestyle. And we have 4 or 5 generations in the workforce today. This sign says, short-staffed is the new pandemic. Please be kind to our staff. This really, really bothered me during the pandemic. I'm going to talk about that more in a minute. If you have a sign up like this or anything like this in your restaurant, text someone from your team right now and tell them to take it down, and I'll tell you more about that in a minute. So we can fix 80% of our staffing issues by leveling up our leadership team and our team. How are we going to do it, right? That's what we're here for. So I hope I can give you some really practical takeaways on how we can do this. If you see something you like, write it down, take a picture of the slide, and if you don't have any pictures at the end, I didn't do my job up here. So let's get you one good thing. So let me talk about a case study and a proof of concept. So that restaurant on the left there is in our franchise group. We've been running it for about 8 years, and it has really grown to one of the elite restaurants in the chain, top 50 in the chain out of 3,000 in terms of sales volume. Team member engagement score is all-time high. Food safety is an all-time high. And about 18 months ago, we had the opportunity to run a second restaurant. And they already had leaders there, and the restaurant was in pretty bad shape, quite honestly. And we thought, what are we going to do? How are we going to level up these leaders? What model are we going to use? Do we use what we did at store 1, or do we just get lucky? Well, less than 18 months later, here's the result in store number 2. They ended the year up 20% in sales growth. They climbed over 265 spots in the store ranking. Food safety went from the worst score we could get to the best from a third-party auditor. They won Business of the Year from the Chamber of Commerce. The shared customer base increased fivefold, telling me there's now trust back in the community. These stores are less than 6 miles apart. And the employee engagement survey, personally committed, was up 11 points, and overall job satisfaction up 5 points. So I think that tells me what we're doing is working in these restaurants. So what are we doing? Let me share it with you. Here's where we're going. We're going to talk about taking ownership, cultivating emotional intelligence, and having crucial conversations. You ready? Let's dive in. Taking extreme ownership. Here's a definition I like. It's a commitment of the head, heart, and hands to fix the problem and never again affix the blame. A commitment of the head, heart, and hands to fix the problem and never again affix the blame. Excuse me. You see, the great thing about our industry is, I hear a lot of leaders say, well, I'd never ask my team to do anything I wouldn't do, right? But in our industry, we get to prove it, right? I take out the trash, I'm making milkshakes, I'm dropping fries. Like, we get to do all that. It's hard in a corporate setting to prove that. And I'm sure it can happen, but I get the opportunity every day to kind of live that out. And, I talked about that sign in restaurants, like, hey, we don't have enough people, but be nice to us, right? Here's the reality. Our customers, they don't work for us, right? Our customers, they don't work for us. What do I mean by that? Well, our customers, they don't care if we're short-staffed. They don't care if we have supplier issues. They don't care if we had call-offs. Our customers don't care about any of that. We do. We better, right? What I tell our leaders is, if our customers wanted problems with their lunch, they would have packed and stayed in the office, right? Or they would have stayed at home and ate over their keyboard. They come to our restaurant, or they're coming to your place, hopefully, because it's an escape. It's an experience. They're spending their hard-earned money. And guess what? Basically every restaurant, probably all of yours, they're selling a chicken sandwich now, right? So we have to do something better than just sell great chicken. So how are we going to do it? Well, here's one reason, or one way. We got to ask the right questions, and those often start with what and how. What can I do today to serve my team better? How can I make this better for my team, for our guests? Not so good questions start with who and when. And the next question I've been pretty guilty of, who dropped the ball, right? Like, that's a question we all like to ask. It kind of shows, where do we start? What's the root cause? But, when I was first working through this material, I thought, I'll just replace who with how, and I'll just say, how dropped the ball? But I guess my fourth grade English teacher didn't like that. So, these questions sound like, when is back of house going to learn how to close so that we can set up the front of house, right? Who's going to fix the prep line so it's more efficient? When is IT going to, okay, that one we can keep. When is IT going to do it, right? So we got to ask the right questions. Okay, taking extreme ownership. Try not to read ahead. These were supposed to come in one at a time. But okay, so taking extreme ownership by second mile service. Here's a definition. Create surprise and delight moments that leave a lasting impression on our guests, right? I read this quote in a book. It says, whoever compels you to go the first mile, go with him too, right? If you're going to do it, you might as well do it right. And then this came in second, like Matthew, it was a joke, but Chick-fil-A, we had to. So anyways, if you're going to, it's not as fun, the delivery's not there, but it's and Matthew. Okay, so anyways, but here, listen to this, don't miss this. If we don't get the first mile right, the second mile, it's just an apology, right? So in our industry, the first mile is making sure the team members in their uniform and the order is correct, and it's hot and fresh and craveable, and our guests would pay full price, that the straw's in the bag, the napkin's in the bag, and when we deliver the item, we deliver it like it's a fine jewel, or like the guest paid $3,000 for it. And if the guest happens to say thank you, we say, my pleasure. Everyone try it. My pleasure. Sounds nice, doesn't it? But here's the reality. I challenge you to figure out what's the first mile and what's the second mile in your business. And I got to tell you, a lot of our competitors, they're not getting the first mile right. And I'm going to give you an example. A few days ago, and I won't name names, they're not here today, but I went to get coffee at a place. It's 8:30 in the morning, and kind of help yourself, basically. And they're out of hazelnut. So I went up to the front counter, and the guy's wearing a Packers jersey. He's behind the counter, Packers jersey. There's the first mistake. But I thought, does he even work here? And I said, oh, sir, it looks like you're out of hazelnut out there. Do you have any in the back? He goes around the corner and comes to the back, and this was the extent of our conversation. No, we don't. Okay, well, so that's we messed up the first mile, right? The first mile really is, they shouldn't really run out of coffee at 8:30 in the morning. But sometimes they do, right? So still within the first mile, what he should have done is said, thank you so much for alerting me to that. I'm so sorry about that. I just got a fresh pot going out, and it's going to take about 7 minutes. Okay, right? The second mile is, where are you sitting at? I'd love to bring you a cup, right? Now, I wouldn't let him because I'm like too much of a control freak. I have to like put my own stuff in it. But, that's the first and the second mile. But it's just not happening in our industry a lot, right? So just by making those moments, you're already ahead of your competition. So I challenge you, what's the first mile and what's the second mile in your business? And you have to do this with your guests, but we have to do this with our team too, right? With our team, it's making sure payroll is accurate. And when they request PTO, it gets on the right check. And when you say, oh, I'm not sure, but I'll circle back with you, you circle back with them in a timely manner. So what's the first mile and what's the second mile in your business? Okay, so it's just not the same without these transitions. Okay, so you don't see the yellow right now. What part do you own? This is a really good activity with your leaders or your team, especially if there's interpersonal conflict. And, those things can be heated, right? So I draw a circle and I say, shade in what part you own. And they'll shade in this really small part, which is okay. That's okay. And I just say, great, that's the part we're going to work on. That's the part we're going to work on right there. Well, but Sarah, but Joe team member, yeah, we're not talking about them right now. We're talking about you. That's the part you can own. And guess what? This is a great activity to do with your team and your leaders, but you have to do it with yourself too. And it's challenging. And occasionally people will say, oh, 0, I own 0, like with a lot of confidence. And I'm like, okay, now we have a new issue. That's okay. That's okay. I like when people are that honest. And I say, well, the fact that you and I work in the same building probably means I'm at least 1% at fault. So I'm wondering if you're more than 1%, right? So what part do you own? Okay, so we talked about ownership. The next thing that we really instill into our leadership team is this development of the head and heart. I'm talking about emotional intelligence. I like this quote here. It says, it takes something more than intelligence to act intelligently. I think that's fair, right? So let's dive in. Here's some stats around it. So only 22% of leaders were found to have strong emotional intelligence, less than a quarter. However, employees with emotionally intelligent managers are 4 times less likely to leave their job. To me, that's saying 75% of your leaders are driving your team away. That's scary. The strongest predictor of workplace skills out of 34 traits was emotional intelligence, right? And people with it are making $29,000 more a year. Now, this 95, that was supposed to come in after the fact for a big laugh, but look at this. Less than a quarter of leaders have it, but 95% think they do, right? There's a gap there. Okay, so here's the resources we use one at a time. And by the way, you can almost pick any leadership resource at random. It's the fact that you're doing it with your team, right? And you're putting effort into it, and there's this common language. And by the way, it probably shouldn't be the GM. They're too busy. And I know you might not have a dedicated HR person or a talent person in your restaurant, but I bet it could be a great stretch assignment for somebody. So the first one we use is Enneagram. So how many of you have heard of that, right? I'm a 7, wing 8 on the Enneagram, or when I'm around my boss, I'm a recovering 3 because he's a 3, so he doesn't think that joke's as funny as I do. But so the Enneagram is basically a personality assessment, and there's 9 types, and you normally have a dominant one and a wing, and there's healthy versions of them and not so healthy. And when you're stressed, you tend to go a certain way, and it's rather scary how accurate it is. And a lot of times clients or leaders will say, don't these kind of things just put me in a box? And I say, no, it's designed to help you get out of a box. And, just being vulnerable here, 8s on the Enneagram, they can be rather direct and maybe confrontational. And if they're not healthy, they can be a jerk. And I don't get to be a jerk at work or in a meeting and say, well, too bad, I'm an 8, right? Like I have to know myself better and safeguard against that a little bit. The next one we really like is Patrick Lencioni's Working Genius. So this shows how people work as part of a project, when you think about a project start to finish. And there's 2 strengths someone has, which are called their genius. There's 2 competencies, and then there's 2 frustrations. And it doesn't mean they're bad at those frustrations. It means it drains their bucket. And this one's really eye-opening because when I got my results, which happened to be galvanizing, I love rallying around, wearing a red suit, that kind of thing. And then discernment, that's helpful in HR. When when I got my results and I applied it to my past career highs and lows, I was like, oh, of course, no wonder that failed. I was working out of my frustration, or no wonder that was successful. I was living in my genius, right? So when I worked for Macy's, every single morning before the store opened, we had this thing called the morning rally. And it was like the highlight of my day. And we gathered the team around and we were playing music. And here's what we did in sales yesterday. And here's our goal today. And most of my colleagues, they dreaded it. And before I knew this, I just thought, what's their deal? Like, they can't lead in this capacity. And, this is part of the job, right? Well, they didn't have galvanizing, right? Like, no wonder they hated doing that. And I loved it. And then the last one is Multipliers. It's a great book by Liz Wiseman. And the researchers in this book found that when they polled the participants, they asked a question like this: how much is your manager getting out of you? And they would say like 110%, 120%. And it really frustrated the researchers, right? They're like, the math isn't mathing here. But what they finally realized were that great managers, which she calls multipliers, they got more out of the employee than they even knew was possible to give. Now, on the flip side, she talks about something called a diminisher, and even that sounds like kind of frightening, right? So I'm sure we're all picking like, oh, I'm a multiplier. But the reality is she talks about the diminishing we often do accidentally. And some of our best intentions are actually diminishing our team. So these are really great resources. We are really careful never to weaponize these or use them as excuses. And again, you can use some of these, none of these, all of these. But as a result, I've gone through these personally. I've led these classes with our team. I can tell you I'm a better leader, a more engaged father, and a more supportive husband. And when you're better here and here, that makes such a big difference. And, let's say you need 10 people to run the minimum operations of a restaurant, right? I'd rather have 8 people who have all of this than 15 that have none, right? And that's how you solve this staffing issue. So those are some resources we like to use. I've created this leadership profile through my friend AI and plugged all my leadership results in it. It talks about the good, bad, and ugly of Nick as a leader. And anyone who works with me, I send it to them and I say, here it is. These are my tendencies. And, I'm playing with my cards facing out, basically. And this is one of my opportunities. It says, may become frustrated with slow processes, routine tasks, or lack of progress on long-term goals. And you see, before I had words around that, when this happened in a meeting, I thought, do I have anger management issues? Like, what's going on here? But I don't think I do. This is just how I'm designed as a leader. So I have to work on that. I have to safeguard against it. And better yet, my team has permission to call me out on it. So, because they know it's coming. They know it's part of it. And when we avoid these kind of things, over the course of a month, a year, a decade, it just erodes so much. So that's a little bit about one of my opportunities. Okay, lastly here, your leaders have to be coaches, and they have got to have crucial conversations. Carrie Patterson defines crucial conversation as a discussion between 2 or more people in which they hold opposing opinions, the stakes are high, or emotions run strong. Does that ever happen in your restaurants? Of course, right? Just based on like the operations of it, it's bound to happen. So what are we going to do about it? Well, eventually, let me go back. At first, when I started in some of the restaurants, the leaders wanted me to have all the tough conversations. And I said, well, that HR is more here to support and guide and legal and all this kind of stuff. But they didn't really like that answer. So I tried it. I tried having all the conversations, right? And some of these restaurants have 150 people. And what the team member told me time and time again when I had the conversation with them was something like this. Okay, Nick, thanks for sharing that with me, but why didn't my leader tell me this? Why didn't my leader tell me this? They're working side by side with me. So eventually I started telling our leaders, hey, you got to have these conversations, and you need to document, right? You got to have these conversations. We need to document. Here's some action, right? If you only take one picture, take a picture of this. This is something you can do starting tomorrow or when you get back, right, in a few days. Take the Enneagram and the Working Genius assessment. Ask yourself and your leaders, what part do you own? What part of this is mine? Have the conversation you've been avoiding. Let that sit in. Have the conversation you've been avoiding. We all have one, right? Someone might have just got the butterflies in the stomach. And then here's your bonus one. Ask someone, hey, tell me something I don't want to hear. What's it like to be on the other side of me? And by the way, don't ask this if you're not ready to hear the answer or if you're going to be defensive. So tell me something I don't want to hear. That's a tough one. So with that, it's been my pleasure, and thank you so much, everyone.